All right, looks like we got 9 people in. So it is morning where I am, but I'm sure for most of you it's probably evening. So good evening. How are we all doing? So we have I Swear Nothing in saying Morbius is going to win all awards. Morbius is the most movie of 2022. There's no question. It's definitely a movie. I don't think Morbius should be in the Razzies. I have issues with both the Oscars and the Razzies. There's problems with both of those lists, and I do not know what Morbius is doing in there. There are well, I don't know about many, like it's not a good movie, but there's a bunch of far worse movies than Morbius. All right. Whiskey Straight Al. How are you doing? Straight Al. Doing all right? Okay. So I'll just chat to a few of the people coming into the stream just to warm up before I get into the main meat and bones of the chat. Darren Coyle says, "Hey Des, where's Karen Iphone?" Yeah, she comes and goes. She'll get here maybe. Who knows? How did I get here? Hey, how you doing, BK? I ground a wee dram and chilling. Good man, good man. I'm just drinking water. It's morning for me. Although I did have a Guinness last night. Who's to slap who this year? Oh yeah, good question. Do you know? I doubt. You know, the Oscars have actually hired an emergency response team. This was because the Academy were criticized for how they dealt with the Will Smith situation. You know, because he went up and assaulted a man on stage, and they didn't do much about it on the evening. But they now have a an emergency response squad just in case anything goes wrong. Do you know what I was thinking though? Imagine if instead of Chris Rock, if it was a woman, like, and Will Smith had gone up there and slapped a woman. Can you imagine what would have happened? It would have been brilliant. It would have been worth it happening just to watch the world melt down in response. Let's have a look here. Last message doesn't count. Your channel is awesome. Hope it blows up. Thanks very much, Nuclear Bomb. It already has blown up. I started it properly in May last year, and we're already at 16,000, so it's doing great. It's the last video. Well, the last video was a Joker video, but the last main video, the worst of vocal awards, that did far better than I expected. So I was very happy with that. Very happy with the response. And Evening Despot, I hope Strange Worlds gets in nominated. I lost money and time. You spent money on Strange World? Jesus, man. You should sue Disney. It's a look. I'm not gonna lie. I didn't watch Strange World because it's not on the Razzies or obviously not the Oscars, but it's not on either of those. I didn't watch it, and but it looked to me like just a miscarriage of entertainment, just an absolute abortion of a movie. No one should be forced to watch something like that. So I am sad to hear that you had to sit through that. Tigris, what's up, buddy? Glad to see you live. Doing well, Tigris. Hope you're well. And yeah, it's good to be live. This is my first. I've done 2 live streams with other fellas, but this is the first one I'm just doing myself. So I've been looking forward to it. I'm about to play Aliens Fireteam. Will it be safe, or will Whitefest lefties kick my door down? I don't know what that means, but good luck to you. By the way, if there's a problem with the audio, let me know. I'm using this crappy wee mic. It's this thing here. It's not bad. It's not bad. Now, it's not my main mic. The mic I use to record videos is over there, but it's too big and bulky for the lives. So I'm just using this little lapel mic. I loved your woke awards. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mapna. Sorry, I don't read Russian. No idea how to read that, but I'll just say Mapna. So thank you, Mapna. I'm glad you enjoyed that award show. The video on how Galadriel from Rap was gold. Yeah, I enjoyed those Galadriel videos. It's true though. She is a villain. When you look at that character in context of the show, she's just a crazy genocidal villain. I was thinking yesterday, Rings of Power. How can Rings of Power season 2 not be better than season 1? Because season 1 was so terrible. There's nowhere to go but up. It couldn't possibly be as bad, could it? Suppose we'll see in time. All right, audio is spot on. Thanks for letting me know, Whiskey Straight. All right, I think there's enough of us in, so we'll just get going on the main chat. So we've got 22 in, which is plenty. Right, now I'm going to start with the Razzies nominations. So the Razzies nominations this year, the worst movie category in the Golden Raspberry Awards were Blonde, Good Mourning, Mourning spelled with a U, Morbius, the live-action Pinocchio Abomination, which I'll just call Disney's Pinocchio. There were 3 Pinocchio movies in 2022. I've seen 2 of them. One of them was very good, and that was not the Disney Pinocchio. And a movie called The King's Daughter, which is kind of there's an interesting history behind it, but it's not a very good movie. Anyway, I'll start with Blonde. So Blonde is a biopic. It's a biopic of Marilyn Monroe, and it is absolute pretentious shite. It is a terrible movie, and I'm really pleased that the Razzies have nominated it. I think what the director is going for is it's Oscar bait, and he's really, really working the Me Too angle. He's portraying Marilyn Monroe as a victim and nothing else. Like, she wasn't a businesswoman, she wasn't a star, she wasn't a woman who was able to experience the heights of fame and wealth. No. She was just a victim. She was just a rape victim. She was just a victim of the evil male gaze. And that's just the themes and the messaging of the movie, which are extremely heavy-handed. As for the cinematography and the style, it's extremely pretentious. It's very claustrophobic. It's ugly. It's miserable. It's an utterly miserable film. This thing is almost 3 hours long. Of all the movies I watched for this live, Blonde was the hardest movie to watch. It took me, I think, 6 sittings to watch it because it's so boring. It's such an unpleasant watch. The director wants you to be miserable and sad and bored and probably also angry. It's just, that is the cognitive effect that he wants to elicit from viewers, seemingly misery. You look at a movie like, we'll say, the original Star Wars. What is Lucas trying to elicit from the viewer? The cognitive effect he wants to elicit is wonder, big wonder, awe, grandeur, inspiration, spirituality, things like that. This idiot who directed Blonde, he just wants you to be miserable. It is a terrible film. It's despicable. I absolutely hate it. It's also politically clumsy because on the one hand it's Oscar bait, but on the other hand it has these abortion scenes in which the humanity of the baby that is being aborted is very much shown in the movie, and it comes through very strongly. So that would basically be interpreted by the Hollywood leftists who vote for these movies in the Academy as like right-wing messages. I was looking at some of the reviews of this on Metacritic and Rotten Tomatoes, and there were these angry leftists in there saying things like, oh, this is right-wing propaganda because it has anti-abortion messaging. So politically, it's very clumsy in that it's got this whole Me Too thing going on, but it also has this kind of weirdly pro-life message mixed together. It doesn't appeal to anybody. In fact, it probably just makes it from a political, it's not that political. I wouldn't necessarily call it a woke movie, but it's definitely clumsy. It's annoying people from both sides of the aisle. So no one's going to like it. And no one's going to like it anyway because it's a terrible movie and it's really boring and it's voyeuristic and it's dull. It's also lazy. I don't know why he chose to do this, but it's not actually based on real life. It's based on a 700-page fan fiction retelling of Marilyn Monroe's life, like this really pretentious, artsy-fartsy, fictionalized biopic biography that was written. It sounds terrible. It's not a book I would ever read, but he based it on that book. It was my worst, well, it wasn't my worst viewing experience. It was my second worst viewing experience of 2022. I'll get to the worst one. And it's just terrible. It's a director wanking off to his own artistic vision for 3 hours. And the direction in the movie is what I would call obscurist. So you're watching the movie and it's terrible, but the director wants you to be afraid to call it out as the terrible shite that it is. So what does he do? He includes different aspect ratios. So instead of the film having a single aspect ratio throughout its entire length, it cuts to different aspect ratios. It also cuts from black and white to color. and there's a lot of close-ups, and then it cuts back to wide, and it cuts between her youth and her adulthood. It's a mess. It's an absolute mess, and the director would probably give some really pretentious and arty explanation, like, "Oh, I was trying to portray the inner world of Marilyn Monroe while she was being abused in this way." And it's very important that the audience feel a psychosexual connection to her, but in a kind of claustrophobic and postmodern, like just all that nonsense that kind of art critics come out with. Obscurist directing, that's what it is. He throws all this crap, all this pretentious nonsense into the mix to make people afraid to criticize it because they don't want to come off like Philistines. They don't want to come off looking like they didn't understand his masterpiece. And I'm glad it didn't work. Everybody called it out for the garbage that it was. It's a terrible, terrible film. In my opinion, it's the worst film of 2022, and that includes all the movies in the worst of woke awards. It's a wretched, wretched film. Now, Pinocchio is technically worse, but I wouldn't give it this award for reasons I'll go into later. Let's head back to the chat for a bit. Let's see. Been watching you since you did the live with Matty, the angry bootneck. I've done a few lives with him too, not that far from you, up the coast in Anlong. Well, good to know. Whiskey Street. The bootneck live was good. I actually came in to talk about movies, but we ended up talking about politics for the first 30 minutes. It's hard to get away from because it does make you so angry what's going on back, in the UK and Ireland. It's such a depressing state of affairs that you kind of get drawn in. But Bootneck's channel is good. I like his rants. I like how much he hates the BBC. It's good to listen to. And he's a smart man, and he expresses himself well. It's a good channel. It was a good live. The movie was made for people who didn't know her story at all. You would think so, but it would seem to me that Blonde doesn't communicate much about Marilyn Monroe. I mean, I don't know much about Marilyn Monroe at all. But from watching the movie, I learned very, very little about her. Now, that said, I don't necessarily think that's the job of a movie, like a biopic. I think that's more, if you want to know stuff about her, read a book or watch a documentary, don't necessarily watch the movie. But still, it's nice for the movie to be interesting and informative, and Blonde was neither of those things, which does make you question the point of its existence, which there really is none. Tigra says, take Dahmer, it was interesting, but I couldn't watch more than one episode at a time. People like morbid entertainment. I think people do like morbid entertainment. They like entertainment that's fascinated with psychopathy and murder and death and crime and things like that. And Dahmer's a good example of that, but I don't think Blonde is, because Blonde's just too boring. Nothing happens in Blonde. It's a bunch of really ugly scenes. Most of the time, it's just people talking shite, and really boring shite as well. There's just nothing there to enjoy. It's an utterly, utterly unenjoyable film. It's terrible. And I honestly think I must be one of the few people in the world who has made it through all 3 hours of that movie. Because it's almost impossible to watch it all. It's so, so boring. Especially the people that watch it on streaming, they'd probably watch 20 minutes and then just check out, think, no way. Life is too short for garbage like this. All right. Hello, good stream to you, says Dawid777. Thank you very much, Dawid. Hello to you. And Trabant Boot sent me away. The Bootneck's a good man. Been watching old films, but some are real stinkers. Hard Ticket to Hawaii should be cool, has tits in it, and very 80s, but the acting is very bad in a way that made trauma films look great. Well, I mean, so does Blonde. That's another thing. Blonde has a lot of nudity, but and this is Ana de Armas nudity, so it's not like it's low quality. It's a very beautiful woman, but it's not even close to enough to save the movie, unfortunately. I haven't had any interest in any of those celebrity biography movies yet. Arkjaw is right. The celebrity biopic movies generally are wretched. They're usually very formulaic. Now, Blonde isn't formulaic. It goes to the other extreme. It tries really hard. It tries way too hard to not be formulaic and to be original, and it doesn't work. It just falls apart. It's a complete mess. But those celebrity biopics are generally terrible. They're unwatchable trash. The most formulaic, just dreck you can imagine. Like, the worst one that I can remember is Mandela Long Walk to Freedom, which I'll talk about in a little bit, because I will be talking about biopics when I talk about Elvis, which is actually a movie I really liked. But we'll get to that when we get onto the Oscars. Andrew Vasquez says, by the way, thank you for your video about life lessons in your 20s. Right now I'm 27, and by the time I saw your video, I realized I just learned 4 of those 5 and those lessons in the past 3 years. I'm glad to hear that, Andrew. It's, I was thinking about this the other day. How are men in their 20s generally portrayed in movies and TV and in popular media? Because let's face it, that's where most people get most of their information, popular media and, of course, social media. And I think the reality is that men in their 20s in movies, not if they're even in movies, it's the esthetization of Hollywood, but they're generally portrayed as being far more successful, far better looking, far more established in life than they actually are. Because and I'm speaking, this is entirely from the experience of a man. Experience of a woman is going to be very different in your 20s, but for a man, your 20s is a very hard time because you're going into the world to try to make your way with no experience, no skills. You're at the age of 20, 21, you're least attractive to women. Women are going to have very little interest in you because you don't have much money. You don't have a job or a profession. I don't use the word career. It's a bullshit word. I went through that in my She-Hulk video, but profession, if you're lucky enough to have a profession. And it's tough to make your way in the world. You have to work some really shitty jobs to work your way up and try to make something of yourself, and then you have to go through that very awkward phase. And this is it's not all men, but I do think it's the vast majority. You have to go through that awkward phase where you're trying to improve with women and to get their attention and to improve in your dating life, and that can be very awkward and embarrassing at first because you're getting a lot of rejections and women aren't paying much attention to you, and you're losing out to older, more experienced, wealthier men that have more confidence. It's a really hard time in life, and men can feel bad about themselves at that time because they are so, relatively speaking, they're so incompetent. Like, I think about myself, I'm soon to be 34, and I think about myself 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and I was compared to what I am now in terms of proficiency and the things that I know and my knowledge and my experience, it's not even close. There's no way I could compete with myself now, say 10 or 15 years ago, but that's what you have to do when you're a guy that age. It's really, really tough. So that's part of the reason I made that video. It was mostly a memoir, but it is really good that I can help some guys in their 20s to get through what is a very difficult period, but which I think has been kind of glorified as like your golden years as a man. Like, they're anything but your golden years. They're really tough. Most guys in their 20s are poor. That's the other thing. They're really poor. They're broke all the time because their jobs they work are crap. It's not a particularly good time in life. It's when you're in the prime of youth, I suppose, and you can have lots of fun. But yeah, it's a tough time. Anyway, Des, have you seen any movies or shows in the last 15 months you didn't make you want to eat a shotgun? Yeah. Yeah, we'll talk about those in the Oscars. I mean, I just mentioned that I liked Elvis. Elvis is a good movie. And Ozark was a good show that I liked. I think it was cancelled after the last episode, but Ozark is a pretty good show, and I enjoyed it. There's other movies that I liked as well. I watched one recently that I thought was quite decent called Vivarium. It's not brilliant, but it was a fun wee movie. It was like a puzzle kind of movie, and it was pretty enjoyable. Not the best. I thought the ending was decent. It wasn't everything it could have been probably, but it was a decent show. And that was just a movie that just happened to be on Netflix, and I thought, yeah, all right, I'll watch that, and it was enjoyable enough. There's other stuff that I enjoy as well. I'll talk about that when we get into the Oscars section. All right, Puss in Boots 2 is unironically a very good movie. Yeah, that was nominated for Best Animated Feature, and rightfully so, apparently. I did see the Drinkers review on that, the critical Drinkers review, but I haven't watched the movie myself. I suspect I probably will because it comes highly recommended. Batman, Top Gun, and The Whale. I haven't seen The Whale. The Whale has been nominated for Best Actor. My goal for this stream was to just watch all of the Oscars movies and all the Razzies movies and to talk about those and keep it simple. I do want to watch The Whale, but I haven't seen it yet. All right, so let's get back to our Razzies talk. Our next movie is called Good Mourning. This movie is I'll describe what it is first. So this is Machine Gun Kelly and one of his friends, whose name I forget, whose name I did not care to remember. They made a movie. They wrote, the movie, and I put that in inverted commas because there's no real script. I think it's mostly just kind of stoner improv. And Machine Gun Kelly directed it. If you're wondering who Machine Gun Kelly is, I first heard of him because he was going out with Megan Fox, and I saw him at a UFC event. I was watching UFC, and he was there with Megan Fox, and I was like, "Who's that guy?" And yeah, he's a rapper or something. I don't know. I actually did hear a cover of "Killing in the Name of" that he did, because I used that song in one of my videos, and you need to use a cover, otherwise you get hit with copyright even if you use a second of it. And his cover was one of the worst things I've ever heard. It was just awful. It was absolute puke. So he's not good at what he does, and he decided that not being good at what he does, what he should really do is not be good at something else, namely making a movie. It's terrible. So let's get into Good Morning. Well-deserved Razzie nomination here. This movie is about it's basically Machine Gun Kelly playing himself. He is a pop star or rock star of some sort. Or no, is he an actor? He's an actor in the movie. That's right. He's an actor. And he's a famous actor. He lives in Van Nuys. And he wakes up one day and he gets a text from his girlfriend that says good morning, but it's spelt with a U because of a typo. And he's very confused by this. So he endeavors to figure out why she spelt it that way. Like, why is she asking him to mourn? Like, why would you write that? That's weird. And he's trying to text her, but then his phone breaks, and he goes on a weird and wacky adventure that day. And he also is trying to get a part for a Batman movie. It's a terrible film. It's absolutely terrible. It doesn't really have a plot. It's just an excuse for Machine Gun Kelly and his friends to do a bunch of stoner improv scenes. And there's no direction. Like, it's also nominated for worst director in the Razzies, but it's not directed. There's no direction in the movie because it's directed by Machine Gun Kelly, and his understanding of direction is point the camera and go. He has no sense of editing, cinematography, scene blocking, shot composition, photography, color schemes, symbolism, foreshadowing, anything. Like, he has absolutely no cinematographical vocabulary. He doesn't know he doesn't know anything about film. Absolutely nothing. He thinks that a director's job is to just sit in a chair with that little famous director's chair and go, okay, action. His understanding of directing is the same as a 12-year-old's from watching movies and cartoons where the director is this kind of cartoonish figure in that little chair with the stupid hat and the jacket. It's terrible. It's such a bad movie. There's no direction at all. It's so awful. It does have some redeeming aspects, I will say that, and because I'm trying to be generous here. The redeeming aspects were as follows. It's non-political, all right? So it's not like they're trying to shove messages down your throat about who you should be having sex with or who you should approve of other people having sex with. It's not interested in doing that. It's not racialized in that way. It's trying to have a good time. I will say that for it. It's not like Blonde, which just wants you to be utterly miserable. It's trying to have a good time. And there's one or two mild chuckles in it. And Megan Fox is hot in it. And her breasts look very nice in it. And that's about it. That's really the only good things I can say about that film. It's utter tripe. It's actually impressively bad. I actually was watching it, and at about like the 30-minute mark, I just burst out loud laughing because I could not believe that I was watching this thing. It was so awful. It's a truly terrible film, but it's actually better than Blonde. That's how bad Blonde is. This movie is better than it, and it's better than the Disney Pinocchio movie, and that's how bad that Disney Pinocchio is. All right, so I don't want to spend too long talking about Good Morning. For the love of God, don't watch it. I mean, if you really, really like Megan Fox and she's just that pleasant to look at for you, maybe fast forward to the scene where she's walking around and, almost naked. That's nice, but that's literally the only conceivable reason to ever spend any time with this movie. All right, let's head back to the chat quickly. I know Machine Gun Kelly's song that was in Watch Dogs. Oh, Nuclear Bomb. I recently watched The Place Beyond the Pine. It was a very confusing movie because I really thought it was going to be about the biker. It did go a little bit all over the place. I think one of the central ideas is of the movie is that the sins of the father is visited upon the son, which is true. I think we see that with the consequences of fatherlessness, and which is pretty rampant in the United States right now, unfortunately. And it's true, if the father is a wastrel and he gets himself thrown in prison, or he impregnates a girl and then decides, nah, not for me, and takes off, then those sins are going to be visited upon the son. The son's going to have a really hard time in life as a result of that. And that idea is central to A Place Beyond the Pines. I really like, so it starts with kind of the father section and then the son section. I really like both. I think the acting in particular in both is brilliant, but it's hard to get good teenage actors, good kid actors. They're usually terrible due to their lack of experience, but A Place Beyond the Pines does it really well. All the two main young actors in that were both brilliant. So I think that was a really good movie. I enjoyed both, and I also liked that he was a really cool character, Luke, the bank robber. And I also liked the guy Robin who he was working with. Those were really cool characters. And I enjoyed that. But I also liked that I wanted more of it. It didn't overstay its welcome and it left you wanting more when it moved on to the sun section of the movie. I think that's an absolutely terrific film, Place Beyond the Pine. That's one of my favorite movies of the 2010s. Just beautiful movie. Hi, Despot. Hold on. I'll try to pronounce your name. Mythology e occultism. Sorry, man. Hi, Despot, Lord of Wokeness. Much respect, best wishes, and greetings from Serbia, Southeast Europe. Well, greetings to you, Mythologia, and thank you for your kind words. Your destruction of Rings of Power was incredible. Thank you for that. Yeah, that was my first really big video, the Rings of Power video. It had to be done. I absolutely despised that show. I hated it so much. I hated it for its lost potential, not just because it's terrible. Like, I can hate stuff like, you know what it is? I don't actually hate Good Morning because it gives me no reason to hate it. It's just a bunch of wastrel celebrities pissing around with a camera, trying to have a good time. Right? That's all it is. And they're very incompetent and they don't have any talent for it. But they're trying to have a good time, and they're not trying to lecture anybody. They're not trying to give anybody a hard time. They're not trying to beat you over the head with politics, and they're at least trying to have a laugh. So I don't hate it. I got nothing against any of those guys for making that crappy movie, but something like Rings of Power I hate because they are doing all of those things, and it's a waste. It's a waste of $1 billion. I did a calculation. And you might think this is humorous or funny, but I think this is important. Amazon spent $1 billion acquiring the rights to the Lord of the Rings appendix, whatever it was, and they also spent $750 million on the show itself. So $1 billion they spent on this dreck, and I'm not even sure if that includes marketing. At any one time, they have 250,000 people working in their warehouses. If they had given that money to the warehouse workers, they could have given each one of those workers $4,000. But instead, they made this wretched, disgusting ode to Jeff Bezos' ego. It's a rotten, rotten show. I'm glad it got all the backlash that it deserved because it's disgusting what they did to Tolkien and how they wasted that money that should have gone to the Amazon warehouse workers who get screwed over by them. And then you get these leftists defending that show, defending big corporations like Amazon who screw over their workers. And it's like, geez, didn't you guys used to be cool? Didn't you used to be like Nirvana and the Smashing Pumpkins way back in the day? Like actually sticking it to the man, and now you are the man. It's just sickening to hear people defend that show. I absolutely hate it, and I'm glad that I trashed it. I'm glad everybody else trashed it because it's garbage. Right, let's have a look here. It's Iger. Thanks for reading my comment. Thank you, Iger. Boyhood was one of those films I thought was technically brilliant when it first came out. I rewatched it recently and found it terrible, says Fremen on the Sand. I love movies like that. Movies that you watch again and you're like, God, that's not a good movie. But you liked it at the time. A good example of that is Brokeback Mountain, which I quite liked as a teenager. And I thought it was a nice depiction of a love story. But I rewatched it again recently, and it struck me just how immoral the men in it are. It has nothing to do with their homosexuality. They're immoral because they're engaging in what was at the time very dangerous sexual behavior. They're having unprotected gay sex at a time when AIDS was really beginning to hit hard in the States. And meanwhile, they're married with kids. It's like, Jesus, man, what are you thinking? If you want to be at that, that's fine. Go ahead and bang male hookers in Mexico, but you've got to divorce your wife. Like, what the hell are you thinking? Their behavior is very immoral, and I just ended up despising them. Like, these are two men with kids, with wives, but they're screwing around behind their wives' back, and meanwhile they're taking off on their kids, just dumping their kids on their wife. However many weeks out of the year, so that they can go and engage in dangerous sexual activity that might end up giving a horrible disease to their wife. So I just despised the movie now. I thought, what the hell am I watching? It has aged like milk in a desert. Honestly, I think if that movie was released today, it would get called out. But at the time, it made sense to people, I suppose. But that's another movie I think has aged badly. Let's have a look at a couple more comments. Are you wearing at this PJ Drones Club Hijinks asks about my jacket? I got this in O'Neill's. O'Neill's is just an Irish sports store, and this was on sale. And I like it, so I thought I'll get that. I think it looks pretty good, and it's comfortable, and it's warm. All right, but it's a local hurling club. Hurling is an Irish sport. All right, what is that hurling club called? It's called I can't read that. Anyway, let's move on. I didn't see Rob when I saw your video. I began to hate it. Good. I like to inspire hate in my viewers. How did you like Midsommar? Recently watched Drinker's Review and was in a little shock. I haven't seen Midsommar. I might watch it eventually, but I haven't seen it. I'm planning to do a new video series. I'll be interested to get some feedback about this. It's going to be called Was It Really That Bad? So I'll be looking at old movies, probably from the 90s or before the 90s, and I'll just be asking the question, was it really that bad? Like, so Batman and Robin, was it really that bad? Like, was it as bad as its reputation suggests, or is it actually aged quite well, especially compared to the woke trash that we get nowadays? So I might look at some old bad movies, although Midsommar is recent, and I'm pretty sure it's terrible. I don't know. I doubt I'll ever watch it, to be honest. I'm not going to lie. There's a tempest in me, and the sea is always right. Oh man, I love those lines. That was my favorite part of that show. Those absolutely trite, pathetic attempts at neo-Shakespeareanisms. It was embarrassing. It was hard to listen to. I loved it. So cringe. You're welcome. I discovered your channel a few weeks ago, and I love it. You're one of the few people who's brave enough to say what we're all thinking. Well, I'm glad to hear it. I think there's a lot of YouTubers that are saying it, though. There's a lot of people in the film space that are saying the same thing, and the backlash is really growing. I think that probably the woke era should be about 10 years altogether. So it started in 2016. I think it's going to be pretty much done by 2025 because just the audiences have pushed back against it, and even critics now aren't. I know critics are shills, and when it comes to stuff like what they did in early Rings of Power and how they always attack the fans as racists and get on board with this fan bait strategy, I know they're kind of scummy, but even the critics are beginning to turn against some of this crap. Like the way that Blonde pushing the whole Me Too thing, it would have got away with that a few years ago, but it didn't get away with it in 2022. So I do think the zeitgeist is beginning to shift, and the whole woke thing will probably be done by the middle of this decade. But that said, a lot of the productions, a lot of stuff prior to 2022, because I think 2022 was a real sea change and a real cultural shift in how woke is perceived. A lot of the stuff that was in production before that is going to still be absolute woke dreck. So that's still going to be coming out for the next 2 to 3 years, I reckon. Which is great because it means we can do more Worst of Woke awards. All right. Give me the meat and give it to me raw. Drones, I would like to. If you were here, I would give you the meat and I would give it to you raw. All right. I recommend to all of you Barry. I actually do. I was meaning to watch the Barry TV show, so I'll make sure to check that one out. All right. So let's get back to our Razzies talk. So now we are going to talk about Morbius. Oh, Morbius. The part where he said it's morbin time, I just morbed out. I started morbing all around the room. I was morbing off the walls. I was so morbed out that my wife had to come in with a demorber and demorb me. That was the only way I was able to stop morbing. Very morbid. The movie is very morbsome. I'll say that. It is the movie of 2022. It's one of the movies of 2022. It's also utterly mediocre. It's utterly mediocre. It's a kind of a crappy superhero origin movie. It's so middle of the road. It's so junky. But I love Matt Smith in it. he's absolutely brilliant. The guy who plays Milo, he was also in House of Dragon. His star has really risen in the past year, especially because of House of Dragon, but also because of junk like Morbius. He was brilliant in it. He's really funny. I liked his character. He really understood the character and he sold the character transformation so well. Like 1 minute he's this pathetic figure of sympathy, and the next he's a psychopathic murderer who is not only forced to, but seems delighted to be able to go on this killing rampage. It's a lovely character. Do you know what they should do? They should just make a Milo movie. Forget about Morbius. Just make a spin-off movie with Matt Smith in the role as Milo, going around killing people, doing little dances. It'd be wonderful. They could make it a meme movie for a low budget. I'd watch it. I'd pay to watch it. I'd go to see that before I go to see any of the shite that's coming out in cinema this year. My God, some of the crap that they've got on the roster. Although I am looking forward to the Mario Brothers movie because I think it's going to be massive, and I think it's going to herald in an age of video game movies, which will probably end up pushing comic book movies into the second or even the third tier. I think that the era of comic book movies as the mainstay of cinema is coming to an end, and I think that the Mario Bros movie might be a herald of change. But we'll see what happens. Maybe it's a terrible movie and I'll hate it. Anyway, so Morbius, I thought I don't think it should be in here. I'm going to be honest. I thought it was sometimes fun. It was fast. It was to the point. It didn't seem particularly ambitious. It was badly directed, but it wasn't that badly directed. The cinematography is very poor. If you tried to watch that movie with sunlight in the room, you wouldn't be able to see anything, especially the third act and the final fight scene. The final fight scene was terrible, way too dark and too fast, too predictable, and just crap. Bad CGI too. Real letdown at the end when the two finally face off and fight. No good. Although I did like it when he said it's Morbin time and started morbing. Very predictable. I knew exactly what was going to happen. Milo's going to attack the girl, and then what's his name? Morbius is going to come to save her, and then they're going to have a showdown, and it looks like the good guy's going to lose, but then something's going to happen to make him pull victory from the jaws of defeat, and then he's going to, I'll not spoil the ending, but the ending is going to, I knew exactly what was going to happen. It was utterly predictable, paint by numbers crap. That said, it wasn't that bad. It was just a really generic comic book movie. And this, I think, it's an interesting, the audience reaction to it was interesting because nobody really liked it. I know the memes were good. The memes were good, but no one liked the movie. And it seems to me that it's been an unfair victim of superhero fatigue. So there have been so many superhero movies, stuff like Black Adam, just typical middle of the road generic crap like that, and God knows how many other superhero movies get released every year. You don't even know most of them. They fly under the radar, but most of them are crap. Most of them are crap, and people are sick of them. I think a lot of people are sick of them. You've seen that with Quantumania. Quantumania has just flopped, and rightfully so. Apparently, it's a terrible film. Now, that might have been word of mouth because it had a massive drop-off in the first, I think a record-breaking drop-off in the second week, and people aren't going to watch it. They just, I think, to a large extent, I think they're just sick of these comic book movies, superhero movies. That's definitely an element of it, and Morbius, I think it got a lot of backlash because of that, because it was just another dull, generic movie. It wasn't that bad, but people are so sick of that. They're so sick. They've seen it a billion times that they got laid into Morbius. It didn't do anything that 1,000 other movies hadn't done before. It just did it slightly worse or at around the same level. There's no way it should be on the worst movies list. It's not that bad. It's just utterly mediocre. There are far worse movies. Wakanda Forever is a far worse movie than Morbius. I haven't watched all of Bros yet, but it's a worse movie than Morbius. Bros is a really nasty movie as well. It really, really wants to make some extremely acerbic political statements. And it's a very unpleasant watch as well. It's a worse movie than Morbius. There's other movies. I can't think of them off the top of my head. Jurassic World Dominion, there you go. That's a worse movie than Morbius. Morbius shouldn't be in here. It's been unjustly maligned. It's just crap. It's not as bad as these other movies. All right, so let's head back to the chat for a little bit. Matt Smith seems to give everything his all. He does, Arcjaw, with that, and he's terrific in House of Dragon, and he understands the roles that he's playing. It's not just that he does give a good performance; he does really seem to understand on a deep level the characters that he's playing. He really gets into their heads and portrays them very well. He's clearly a very intelligent guy, and especially as an artist, as an actor. Like, he has a very high acting IQ. He's probably one of my favorite actors that I've become aware of recently. I generally enjoyed the Super Mario Bros. Movie. I even played Mario once before watching it. Are you talking about the movie with oh God, what's his name? He died a few years ago. Can't remember his name, but he was a British actor, and I think he played Mario. And I did see that. I thought it was seen it as a kid. I can't remember it. I don't remember disliking it particularly. Morbius is the gift that keeps giving good memes. Yeah, Morbius does have good memes. It does. There's no question. I mean, it's worth it for the memes at least. And it's not loaded with all that political trash that MCU movies are usually loaded with. So it's just trying to be a movie, and it succeeds. It is a movie. It's definitely a movie. I've been watching. So 37M says, I've been watching the Mitchell and Webb look recently. Some great sketches in there, and at this point gives me nostalgia for the late 2000s. Interesting. Great comedy. Highly recommend. I might check that out. Thanks very much for the recommendation. Lightyear is worse than Morbius. I didn't see Lightyear. I watch very few animated movies because they're just all the same boring, generic garbage. Like Strange Worlds, the animation style is pretty much exactly the same as Lightyear. It's just that featureless, dull. Everything looks like it's been stripped away of all. It's everything is smooth. I'm so sick, but I'm so bored of that generic 3D animation, 3D computer animation style. I'm so bored of it. I just can't watch any more movies like that. And they all look exactly the same. You could take one scene from Lightyear, stick it into Strange World, and you wouldn't even notice that it's a different movie. That's how generic these bloody Disney movies look now. It's just coming off the factory line trash. Can't stand it. I saw boobs in thumbnail. I'm here, content guy. Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you, thumbnail guy. It was clickbait. I admit it. I used Megan Fox's breasts for clickbait, which makes me the first YouTuber ever to do that. I enjoyed the thumbnail. I thought it was a funny thumbnail. I had to have her in there. And look, she wasn't bad in the movie. The movie was terrible, but she was hot in it. So there you go. And look, even if you don't stay content guy, I'm glad you enjoyed the thumbnail. So thanks for showing up. Bob Hoskins, thank you. Fremen on the Sand. All right. One thing I realized about woke entertainment is that the writers or producers, in their attempt to represent and end up being racist and misogynistic, says Nuclear Bomb. That is correct. They give tokenized roles, particularly to Black actors. And yeah, it's usually Black. They seem to have, they're let's just be honest about this and call them out for what they're doing. They're fetishizing Black actors and actresses and Black people in general. For example, the Little Mermaid role, like why has she been race swapped? Now, look, I don't think the race swap is actually that important in the Little Mermaid, because I think the Little Mermaid fails already because it's a plagiarism. And when you plagiarize a movie, it automatically fails. It's already terrible. So it doesn't matter what else you do in it. It's already a failure. So they could make her a Martian with 3 eyes and it wouldn't actually, that would be pretty cool. Well, anyway, it doesn't matter what else they do, what other mistakes they make. Once they have plagiarized somebody else's work, it's already a failure. I can't consider it as anything other than just a disgraceful admission of creative bankruptcy. So who cares if she's race swapped? It's already junk. But they still shouldn't do it. It's fan bait strategy, and it's tokenistic. It's insulting to Blacks. It's like, oh, you want to be in movies? Okay, here, take the Little Mermaid. We'll just make her Black, and there, you can be happy now. Smile and do a seal clap. It's really insulting. It's mind-boggling to me that any Black person would look at that and think, oh, thank you, Disney. It's like, are you kidding me? That's not. That story has absolutely nothing to do with their history or their community or their art or culture or anything like that. It's literally blackface. It's just blackface thrown on a white character. I swear to God, in 10 years, people are going to be looking at that stuff and cringing. It's going to be thought of as really racist, I think, in 10 years, to just be swapping out these these white actors and putting in black actors in a white role, it's just going to be thought of as really cringy, dumb thing that especially Disney and the BBC and Amazon used to do. I hope to God it ends, because it's just really cringe and dumb and stupid. And like, what do you think? Do you think you're Martin Luther King? Do you think you're marching at the front of the crowds at Selma? This is the March on Washington. We're gonna have a black Peter, or a brown Peter Pan. Yeah, take that, white supremacy. It's, what are you doing? Just present a reasonably accurate visual presentation of the characters as we know them. It also makes sense from a brand perspective. The Little Mermaid's gonna bomb. It's going to do crap in the States, and it's going to do really badly abroad, because Asian audiences in particular are going to look at it and think, what the hell is that? That's not the Little Mermaid. And they're not going to go see it. It's like if Coca-Cola decided to release a black can of Coca-Cola to celebrate Black History Month or something, no one would buy it, because they don't know what it is. It's, without the brand, the market can't relate to it. It's poor business. Anyway, I don't think it's sustainable, the whole race swap thing, but we'll see what happens. Maybe I'm wrong. So Freeman on the side says Patrick Stewart was one of the first to race swap. He wanted to play Othello, so got black cast to play every other role so he could play Othello. To be fair, that's pretty legend level stuff, I have to say. Forcing the entire cast to race swap, that's like boss level stuff. I want to do this, so everybody else is going to race swap. That's funny. That's like just a living meme. All right, so let's take a look at our next Razzies movie. We're going to be discussing Pinocchio live-action Abomination, which I refer to for brevity's sake as Disney's Pinocchio. So this is the worst movie of the worst movie genre. The worst movie genre probably used to be torture porn or gore porn. Like there's a horror movie I saw. I can't remember what it's called. It's about this clown. It got popular recently, and he dresses in black and white. Can't remember what it's called, but it's a torture porn movie. Really disgusting. They used to be like the worst movie genre. They're not the worst anymore. The worst movie genre now is the live action Disney remake. That is the worst movie genre in history, and Disney, I've seen a few of them, and Pinocchio must be the worst one. This, I won't even call it a movie. This thing is shockingly bad. And I mean, not just because it's a plagiarized movie, but at a very basic level. The first 25 minutes of Disney's Pinocchio take place entirely in Geppetto's gloomy, dull apartment. The first 25 minutes of the movie, it's just this stationary scene in the apartment, and the characters aren't really even talking to each other. The Jiminy Cricket, this perversion of Jiminy Cricket, this hideous perversion of him, is monologuing a lot, and this horribly miscast, tokenized version of the Blue Fairy comes up. It's really, oh geez, it's so hideous. And I actually thought it was a dude in a dress. When I first saw it, I thought they were doing the whole trans thing, but it turns out it's a woman. So she grants Pinocchio's wish, and then Tom Hanks shows up, having just read the lines for the movie in his trailer, and oh my God, it's terrible. It's absolute trash. It was the most unpleasant viewing experience for me of 2022. It was worse than Blonde. And what made it worse was that Robert Zemeckis directed it, the same guy that did the Back to the Future trilogy. And that's my favorite trilogy. I don't think it's the best trilogy of all time, but it's just my personal favorite. To see him directing this is just sad. And it's not like, oh, well, he's old now, and artists kind of lose it when they get old and they're not as good anymore. No, I just saw The Fabelmans. I watched The Fabelmans by Spielberg, and The Fabelmans is a very good movie. Spielberg's in his 70s. There's no reason just because you're old you can't make good art. There's no reason Robert Zemeckis should be doing anything like this. I can't think why. Is it just for money? Is the guy just need the money, so he shows up, and like, he doesn't even show up. He didn't even bring his C game. It's just an utterly pathetic movie. The directing is terrible. He actually wrote the script. He co-wrote the script. The script is awful. Tom Hanks is terrible in it, and you can tell he put no effort into it. He was just showing up for a check. The music is what they did to the music is unforgivable. So the old music it has these new really bad arrangements, and it's not just badly arranged. The way it's mixed badly. The music is generally, it sounds over compressed. It hasn't been panned properly, and the vocal is way too high, and the music just sounds like this crushed, ugly mix in the background. And the songs are kind of half sung, half shouted, half talked, half rhymed. It's awful. It's absolutely they completely butchered the songs, and a lot of the singing is just terrible. It's generic. It's exactly what Disney do with all of their old music now. They just turn it into the most low effort generic shite filled with auto tune. It's horrible to listen to. All of the new music is just typical generic, utterly and instantly forgettable Disney brand junk. Awful. There's a scene in this Disney remake, this Pinocchio remake, where Disney is walking along the street and he sees a big pile of shit, and he stoops over to have a look at it and examine it. And there's no reason for it to be there. It doesn't have anything to do with scene logistics or theme or symbolism or anything. There's no reason whatsoever for that big pile of horse manure to be in the movie. And I think Chris Gore, I watched a video when Chris Gore, who's a movie critic that I really like, he reckons that the animators actually put that into the movie to send a message to the audience. We know what this movie is. We know how bad it is. We know that it is a literal steaming pile of shit. And I agree with that, because there's no other reason you would put that in there. And a movie that bad and that ugly and that cynical and soulless, if you were an animator working on that, and animators are artists, bear in mind, these people want to be working on good movies, on art. That's what they were dreaming about when they were kids, dreaming about becoming animators before Disney were what they are now. They don't want to be working on movies like this. So I think they left that in there as kind of like revenge against Disney from forcing them to animate this absolute atrocity. That's the worst. Now, that is the worst. Technically speaking, the Disney remake is the worst movie of 2022, but I don't think it should get the Razzie Award because it's a plagiarism. Because it's plagiarized, I don't think it should be allowed to qualify. It should be disqualified from any award category that does not recognize it as a plagiarism. So, for example, in my show, in the Worst of Woke Awards, it was only nominated for. It wasn't nominated for worst movie. It was nominated for worst remake. It can't get, in my opinion, it shouldn't get a worst movie nomination because it's plagiarism, and therefore it is disqualified from consideration from those categories. It needs to be its own thing in order to qualify for that, and this thing doesn't. So I don't even think it qualifies for a Razzie. That's how bad this thing is. It doesn't even qualify for a worst movie Razzie. It only qualifies for worst remake because it's not really a movie. It's just it's a copy of something. It's a plagiarism. And I despise all of these movies, and I can't wait to do a review of The Little Mermaid when it comes out in May, so I can tear it to pieces because I'm sure it's terrible. All right, so we're going to head back to the chat before we round up our Razzies talk. So Fremen on the Sand, I watched the Human Centipede trilogy 2 years ago. Yeah, I think that's one of those torture porn movies that I was referring to. Gotta admit, I didn't like it, but it made me laugh. I didn't see it, so I did see the South Park episode. I thought the South Park episode was very funny. It was worth the movie existing just for the South Park episode. Have you seen Zemeckis used Cars? Incredible flick. That is not so PC. I haven't seen that one. No, I might check that out. I'll have to check it out. Kurt Russell. All right, Arcjaw says, I dread to think what a movie about the Troubles would look like if it was made right now, especially if Hollywood got involved. I would love to see it. I'd love, like, 30% of the actors would be, mostly black or Asian. The IRA would have trans members in it. The British soldiers would be running around with pride flags. I would love it. I really hope that Disney does an adaptation of like a popular Troubles book or something, and we get to see that before the woke year ends. I need that in my life. I just do. It's a great idea. Mermaids in April. I thought it was in May. Looking forward to see you eviscerating. Me too. I'm looking forward to the reviews. That's the one thing about these movies. I love watching them get torn to shred by YouTube critics. Like Obi-Wan. My God. I don't want to talk about that show, but I really enjoyed watching it get torn to shreds. That's the MCU as well. All the MCU is good for anymore is providing fodder for funny videos on YouTube, and it'll be the same with this Little Mermaid live action Abomination. It's gonna be a fun time. Look, hey, if you can't cry anymore because you're out of tears, you might as well just laugh at it, right? We'll have a good time with that. Have you seen the Last of Us series? It's a woke perversion of the game, and it's really boring. I have been too busy watching all this crap from the Oscars and the Razzies, and I've only watched the first episode. I think you're referring maybe to the gay relationships in it. I don't know. I haven't. I've only seen I haven't even seen the first episode. So I will watch it because I was enjoying what I saw so far. Although I doubt I'll review it. There's far too much other stuff that I'm working on at the minute. But I'll definitely check it out. See, I liked The Walking Dead until it got really crap. I liked that for a while. All right, so we're gonna do our last, and this I'm gonna talk very briefly about this. Our last Razzies movie is called The King's Daughter. This is pre-woke era. Now there's a weird history to this. This movie was filmed in 2014, and then it went into development hell. Apparently, there were a lot of problems with the CGI, and you can really tell because the mermaid's face in it is just really hard to look at. It's terrible. Her face never moves. She doesn't have any facial expressions. I honestly think it never really left development hell. Whatever studio, because it was owned by 4 or 5 different studios, they kept reselling it because they didn't think they would make any money on it. And the last studio to own it, I forget which one it was, they obviously looked at it and thought, you know what? We're not putting any more money into this. This can't be fixed. Just release it. And they released it, and it's not finished. You can tell to look at the movie that the CGI isn't finished. It's about like halfway done. It kind of reminds me of that scene in is it the 5th day or the 6th day? Do you know that Arnold Schwarzenegger movie where he becomes he's becomes a clone of himself, and at the end the bad guy tries to clone himself, but the clone isn't finished and it's only like 60% done, and it's this really horrifying like 60% complete human being. It reminds me of that. The CGI in this, it's just not finished. It looks laughably terrible. Check it out for that. Like if you type in The King's Daughter CGI into YouTube, you'll have a laugh at how bad it is. That said, I don't think it should be on this list. It's not that bad. It's not a terrible movie. It's bad, but it's not awful. Bros, Wakanda Forever, and Jurassic World Dominion were all worse movies than this. I would even say Morbius is a worse movie. This one is kind of watchable. It has some decent scenes. Pierce Brosnan is in it, and he's actually very good in it. It's a watchable, crappy movie aimed at teen girls, but I'm pretty sure it misses that demographic. It's a bad movie. It's not awful, and it has some really terrible CGI for you to laugh at. So, and I also don't really know what it's doing here because nobody had ever heard of this movie. I don't think anybody. I think I'm probably one of the like 5 people in the world that have seen this movie. So there was no need to toss it onto this list. Wakanda Forever should have been in there. All right, so yeah, that movie, The King's Daughter, probably just best left forgotten. Now we're going to move on to the Oscars. Now the first thing I want to talk about with the Oscars is the absence of RRR. So I watched 7 of the 10 Oscars nominated movies, and the 3 that I didn't watch were the ones that I guessed would be just garbage, and I'll explain those briefly later on. But RRR was the best movie of 2022 in my opinion. I think it was amazing. Brilliant action, brilliant choreography. I'm not usually into musicals, but I really like the songs in that, and the dancing and the spectacle of it. The story is terrific. The 2 main actors are brilliant. It's a really compelling movie. I loved it. And it's a really long, really ambitious movie. It's trying to portray this massive arc on an epic scale, and it succeeds. It actually knocks it out of the fucking ballpark. That is a great movie, and I love how it puts Hollywood to shame because Hollywood could never make a movie like that nowadays, especially with the strong male leads in it. Those 2 male leads, they're terrific, and they have excellent stream chemistry, and the bromance. I love the bromance. It's the kind of stuff you just don't get in Hollywood anymore. And that's where we're at now. If you want to get quality bromance, just awesome, like high testosterone action, and just men being men, the classical movie hero, you have to go to foreign movies because Hollywood won't make them anymore, except Top Gun, which I'll talk about now. So yeah, RRR is the best movie of last year and should have got the Oscar, and it wasn't even nominated. They did nominate Drek like God, what was it called? Women Talking. Women Talking, I didn't watch, but I did read about it. Maybe it's a masterpiece, but I doubt it. The movie is about a bunch of rape victims talking. So it's a bunch of women who have recently been raped, and they're gathered in a room, and they talk about what they're going to do next. And apparently, that's the entire movie. And it got nominated for an Oscar. I wonder why. Could it have anything to do with its feminist political messaging? I wonder. So that gets nominated. And by the way, that movie made about $3 at the box office. But RRR doesn't. That's just crazy. That's just nuts. RRR is the best movie of last year. No question. I'm going to talk about Top Gun next. Look, hopefully you've all seen Top Gun. It's a great movie, and pretty much everything that needs to be said about it has been said. Excellent popcorn entertainment. You can go enjoy it in the cinema, but it does have some depth too. It's everything you want in a sequel. It's everything that sequels aren't anymore. It respects the original. It has a strong male lead. I thought that scene where it pays tribute to Val Kilmer and his character was beautiful, really well handled, and I'm glad it was in the movie. And it shows you as well that if you want to achieve something, you have to work for it. That's part of the message of the movie. So this movie doesn't have, like Ant-Man Quantumania, you've got a 15-year-old girl building a subatomic reactor in her basement. In real life, that doesn't happen. 15-year-old girls don't build complex machinery in their basement. In real life, if you want to achieve something, you have to work really hard at it for a really long time. And the people that have been doing it much longer than you can kick your ass at it easily. They can embarrass you. I know this from personal experience. They're so much better than you. And you thought you were good, and then you see, like when I studied music in university, and I thought I was a good piano player, and I went and saw some of the older guys, and it was almost upsetting how good they were, because it made me realize, Jesus, it made me realize how much more there was to learn and achieve, and just how that I really wasn't that good. It was a very humbling experience, and that's the reality of life. But you don't get that in Hollywood anymore. As long as you're a woman, you're perfect and you can do anything, and you can build subatomic reactors in your basement. It's ridiculous. So I'm glad that Top Gun gets away from all that crap. I think it has good quality and more realistic messages. I know it's not necessarily a realistic movie, but I do think that the idea that you have to work for something if you want it, that's been lost in Hollywood, and I'm glad that it's in Top Gun. Great movie. I don't think it's the best movie of 2022. It's one of the best, definitely top 5, but it's a quality movie, and yeah, fantastic. All right, so we'll briefly head back to the chat. We're going to talk about Everything Everywhere All at Once next, but before we do that, let's head back to the chat. So, come out, you black and tans has a different meaning nowadays, says Fremen on the Sand. True. Have you seen? Oh yeah, Tango and Cash is a great buddy cop movie. I haven't seen it. I might check that one out. RRR is the Mad Max Fury Road of 2022. Beautiful piece of art that is overlooked by Hollywood because it's not woke crap. Exactly. 100% from Andrew Vasquez. Hit the nail on the head there. It's wonderful. It's just does everything right. It does everything that Hollywood used to do in their prime, and maybe even a bit better. And you sort of look at RRR and you think, if Hollywood wasn't so politicized, if it wasn't so filled with these woke idiots, they could be making movies that good regularly. But they can't anymore. So now it's the Koreans that are making movies that good and TV shows that good, or the Indians, wherever. Hopefully we can we get into a trend of watching a lot more foreign movies and getting away from Hollywood, because Hollywood aren't going to change anytime soon, realistically speaking. And even when they do, just because they're not making woke crap anymore, let's say in 2 or 3 years from now, it doesn't mean the movies are going to be any good. They've systematically eviscerated talent because they have gone through a period whereby they have hired people based on immutable characteristics. So they're hiring people for jobs because they're women. A lot of those crappy TV shows and movies that you get recently, they're crap because they have inexperienced female directors who were hired because they're women. Rings of Power is a good example of that. She-Hulk was entirely showrun by women because, it's a female superhero character, so we have to have a female showrunner and directors and writers. That's one of the reasons that movie was so bad, because they didn't look at the credentials of these women. They just hired anyone who kind of had some experience maybe, and threw them into this fucking Velma. Did you? Velma. We'll be here all day if I start talking about Velma. But this is what happens when you hire based on diversity instead of talent. And the result is that the talent hasn't been allowed to develop. So when they eventually stop doing this, which they will have to, or they're going to go bankrupt, when they eventually stop all this nonsense of intersectional based hiring, like, I don't know if they'll stop it. Maybe they will. But if they do, the talented guys, the guys who are genuinely talented, they haven't been working. They've been left out in the cold because, they've got the wrong parts between their legs, or the skin's the wrong color. How Martin Luther's dream really came true there. And so their talent hasn't been developing. When they eventually do let genuinely talented people come back, it's going to take them a while to develop. And you're going to have this period after woke Hollywood is over. You're going to have this period, I think, of really mediocre, just dreck. It's still going to be crap, but it's going to be non-political crap and kind of the way Hollywood movies used to be crap when they were bad. It's just bad. It's like Morbius, just kind of bad and crappy and occasionally funny because of the memes and the lulls. But it's going to take a long time. You can't just go from the absolute the nadir of the woke cinema era back to the heights of Hollywood. It's going to take them a long time to get back there. And I mean, I'd quite like to see a lot of these studios go out of business and get punished for what they've done over the past few years. Who directed RRR? I don't know, unfortunately. I'll have to look that up. And Mythologia says, and by the way, sorry, Iger, I think it was, I'm Serbian, and the 99% of the movies we were made looked like mafia guys. So 99% of Serbian movies are mafia movies, I think you're saying. Yeah, but I don't know. I haven't seen any Serbian movies, but if you can recommend one, I might check it out. All right, so let's head back and we will look at Everything Everywhere All at Once. So brilliant editing for a start. That's the first thing I would say about this. The movie is absolutely brilliantly edited. The editing is incredible. The fight scenes are amazingly well edited. The acting is top. There's a girl in it called Stephanie Sue. She plays Jobu Tabaki. She's actually 32. She's playing a teenager. And she's brilliant. She's absolutely brilliant. She also plays the daughter. She's wonderful in the movie. I could definitely see her getting Best Actress. Michelle Yeoh or Yeoh, or however you pronounce it. She's also brilliant. Typically excellent. She's a brilliant actress. I've loved her since Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, which is one of my favorite movies. And she is brilliant in this. Now, the one thing I didn't like about it, I think it was a really fun movie. I like that it was chaotic and crazy and sometimes confusing and all over the place. I think that was a good reflection of what the movie is examining, all these parallel universes. It was a really good example of the on-screen movie reflecting the world that it's trying to depict. Really good and fun. Just a really fun movie with original fight choreography. The one thing I did find disappointing about it was the ending. The movie reminded me a little bit of Looper in that it had tremendous potential and it had tremendous villain potential, but I don't think it fully exploited it. And I felt the ending was kind of it really let me down. It's not the ending I wanted to see. Other people will like the ending. I'm not going to spoil it. That would recommend you watch the movie, but I didn't like the ending, and I thought it let the movie down a little bit. Other than that, there's really not that much I could fault it for. Some of the scenes are really gross. I admit that. I think it's trying to be gross. It's trying to elicit some disgust in the viewer because it wants the viewer, in a sense, to experience the same sense of shock and disgust as the characters in the movie. So for some people, that's very off-putting. Like there's one scene in which there's a martial arts kind of parody fight, and the guys have butt plugs stuck in their ass during it, which is, some people would be put off by that. I didn't mind it. I thought it was kind of funny, but it was absurdist comedy, and they were kind of trying to make fun and deconstruct, and not deconstruct in the woke sense, but in the traditional sense, deconstruct the martial arts fight scenes, which have become really cliche, and do something fun with it. So I really liked that, but I can understand if people wouldn't and thought it was just gross. But yeah, great movie, just didn't really like the ending that much. And not the best movie of last year. I do think that it's maybe getting a little bit too much hype. It's not quite as good as people are getting on, but still very good. Still definitely a movie I would recommend. All right, I want to talk about The Fabelmans now. This is Steven Spielberg's movie. So The Fabelmans is basically an autobiographical film. It's about Steven Spielberg's childhood from when he first comes into contact with a camera and the idea of making movies up to his high school graduation. And it's very good. It's not amazing or anything. I don't think it's trying to be amazing. It's not a crazy ambitious movie, but it's a fairly good depiction of a reasonably ordinary family. They're a little bit dysfunctional, but all families are. And it's a good family movie. It's enjoyable to watch. It's very well made, very well directed. This is also why what I was talking about earlier with Robert Zemeckis making that Drek, the Pinocchio remake. It's like old directors like Spielberg are still they're old, but they can still turn out a very good movie like The Fabelmans. And meanwhile, the guy who directed Back to the Future is making the Disney remake Pinocchio. It's just sad. It's genuinely sad. But yeah, The Fabelmans is a very good movie. If you like just fun family movies, I would check it out. And it's also got some other stuff going on as well. Like there's a bullying messaging in there. David Lynch has an absolutely wonderful cameo in the movie. That was probably my favorite part in it. And there's another thing I really liked about The Fabelmans, which was its use of meta humor. I talked about meta humor recently in a Velma video, and I talked about how it's been massively overused recently. And I don't like the way it's used generally. How it's really obvious. I think when you use meta humor and when you use meta elements in a show or a movie, it should be very subtle and not something that the audience necessarily picks up on straight away. And that's how The Fabelmans does it. It does have some, because it's autobiographical, there are some references to the fact that this is Steven Spielberg making a movie about himself. And there are indications in the movie that the characters are aware that this is a movie Steven Spielberg is making about his younger self. But you wouldn't pick up on it unless you were paying very close attention. And there's also an element of it in the David Lynch cameo, which is appropriate because David Lynch is a director who does meta brilliantly. So I really like that about it. I think it's meta done well, as opposed to Velma, which is meta at its absolute worst and done as bad as it possibly can be done. All right, so that is The Fabelmans. Pretty good movie. Definitely not the best movie of the year, but one of the 10 best, I would say. And that's not hard. It's been such a wretched year. 2022 has been such an absolutely terrible year for movies that it's not really hard to crack the top 10 in terms of quality. But The Fabelmans does it, and Spielberg made a good movie, so fair play to him. All right, let's see what else we got going on in the chat. Hollywood make us look like that. Oh yeah, how the Russians always have that fake accent where the Russian is always the bad guy gangster, and he always talk like this, and he always make the exact same grammatical error, and he cannot use the English language correct because he Russian. It's hard to watch. I really hate that. Like there are some things that just years about even mainstream Hollywood movies that aren't even necessarily woke. The Russians always speak like that. They always have that dumb, fucking ridiculous voice. They always make the exact same grammatical errors. It's like, I know Russia's a different language, but they don't all have the exact same grammatical errors. Some of them know the difference between a singular and a plural noun. Oh, it's so condescending. And then the fucking yellow filter in the Mexico scenes. Like every time you go into Mexico, it's a scene from The Simpsons. All of a sudden, everyone just looks yellow, and it's murky and it's hideous. Even Breaking Bad did it. It's like, enough with the yellow filter. Stop it. We get it. They're in Mexico. Okay, Mexicans aren't dusty and yellow. Okay, some Mexicans look like me. Okay, look at Canelo Alvarez. Okay, he's a ginger, pale-skinned, white Mexican, and he doesn't have a yellow filter. Okay, the world doesn't suddenly become yellow everywhere he walks. So, oh god, those are some of the things I can't stand. Like what they do to Serbians and to Russians with the ridiculous villain accent and the yellow filter. That stuff needs to just die. It just has to die. All right. So we're gonna move on to Elvis. Now, Elvis, I would definitely recommend. Elvis is probably the most fun I had when I was watching all of these Oscars movies and all of that Razzies trash. It was just the movie just wanted to have a good time. It was really refreshing because I'm watching stuff like oh god, I don't like Pinocchio, which was a really miserable experience. Morbius, which is a frustrating watch because it's so dull and it's such a limp movie. Or Blonde, my god, Blonde. That was really tough stuff to watch, and it was great to just be able to chill out and watch a movie that just wants to have fun. Something like Elvis. It's very entertaining. Now it is formulaic. It does follow that sort of, you start at the start of the career, and then he has his rise to fame, and then you have your montage with all the fun songs and the groupies and the crazy action on stage and all that fun stuff. And then you have the come down and the comeback. Sure, it follows the formula, but it does it really well. It's not as formulaic as some other movies. The style of the editing and the fact that the director Baz Luhrmann chooses to focus a lot on his early years, and he also focuses a lot on his final Las Vegas period. He puts a lot of emphasis on those two areas, and the other periods don't come through as much. So it's not like it's evenly balanced Wikipedia page style. This happened, then 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 this happened. The end. It's not one of those garbage movies like Ray. Does anybody remember Ray? Awful. That was one of those really generic music artist biopics, and I think Jamie Foxx won an Oscar for that, actually, for what was a pretty mediocre performance as Ray Charles. He won an Oscar for that, and he just did a mediocre Ray Charles impersonation. It was kind of cringy, actually, and he won an Oscar for it. It's one of those forgotten Oscar mistakes. But that movie's terrible when you watch it. It's aged really badly. Maybe they would have gotten away with it at the time, but it has aged so badly. Bohemian Rhapsody, that's another one of those crappy, generic Wikipedia page best of the band's life. This happened, this happened, this happened, this happened, and then let's finish with a big climax. One of those movies, awful. Like it's a kind of entertaining film, and I'm glad it brought Queen's music back into the mainstream and made it popular for younger people and people who maybe weren't aware of it, because I absolutely love Queen's music. But I didn't like that movie. I thought it was very generic and dull. I hated the editing, and I really didn't like your man. Is it Remy Malik? Is his name? I'm not sure. I hated his performance as Freddie Mercury because I felt it was caricaturish, and I felt that the homosexual aspect of his personality was massively overemphasized in the portrayal. When you look at interviews of Freddie Mercury, he wasn't this airy, fairy, effeminate wimp who couldn't hold down a conversation and was just super shy all the time. He's actually quite a confident, funny guy who likes to have a laugh. I felt the portrayal of him did him dirty. I really did. I felt that movie did him dirty because it portrayed him in a way that I don't think he would have wanted to be portrayed. He's just portrayed as this wee wimp. I thought it was awful. I couldn't stand that movie, and I again, your man won an Oscar for that. Shouldn't have. I thought it was the take on Freddie Mercury was completely wrong. All right, so that was Elvis. Elvis, it's similar to in its format and structure. It's similar to those other music biopics, but it does it much better. I also think Baz Luhrmann was the right director for this. It's fun, it's flashy, it's well paced, it's well edited, and it's definitely in the upper tier of biopics. It's not brilliant. It's definitely not the best biopic I've ever seen, but given just how bad biopics usually are, stuff like Mandela, Long Walk to Freedom, awful movie. Ray, I've already mentioned, terrible. Did you see Will Smith did a Muhammad Ali movie? Garbage. So it's a lot better than all of those, and it's better than your typical generic music biopic. It's definitely in the upper tier, and the guy that plays Elvis is brilliant. Now, Tom Hanks is awful in it. Tom Hanks, he's terrible. He's absolutely terrible. He's just like a big, stinking thorn in this movie's face. He's wretched. But the guy that plays Elvis is brilliant. It's worth watching. Austin Butler is his name. It's worth watching just to watch that performance. He's terrific in it. And yeah, it's a fun time. It's a fun movie that you can just chill back and enjoy, which you don't get a lot of those movies anymore. A lot of movies want to hit you with the head with a message. If this had been a woke director, Elvis would have been Me Too'd. They would have portrayed him as like a predator because he was banging groupies basically, and that's what they would have done. And I'm glad that that didn't happen and that the movie kind of honored him. And before I move on, there's one more thing I want to talk about in that movie. In the final scene, it's not spoiling it because it's a biopic. You know what happens to Elvis. In the final scene, it shows Elvis near the end of his life. He's really overweight, super fat, but he's belting out this absolutely brilliant performance, this amazing vocal performance on stage. And it starts with the recreation of it in the movie, and then it goes to the actual footage of it, the real footage. And it's a really good tribute because this is a man at the end of his life. And it's not necessarily his height, it's not necessarily him at his best, but it shows that he was still brilliant even when he was fat and past it. He was still really good. And I thought that was a really good tribute to him. As opposed to, say, Bohemian Rhapsody, which could have done that. It could have showed Freddie Mercury in the studio recording, for example, The Show Must Go On. He was dying of AIDS. He was very anemic, very skinny, very emaciated at that stage. But he did a one-take vocal recording of The Show Must Go On, and it's fucking brilliant. It's one of my favorite vocal performances ever recorded. It's unbelievable. And they could have shown his heroism by showing that. The man that didn't want to be a victim, didn't want people to feel sorry for him like people do now. He took it like a man. He was dying, and he kept working, and he kept making great music because that's a great record. The album that's on, and that's an amazing song as well. The Show Must Go On, absolutely terrific song. That would have been really cool, but instead they did the whole Live Aid thing where they came on for 20 minutes and they rocked the stage, which was really cool. But I think it would have been much more poignant and a much better tribute if they'd done something like what Baz Luhrmann did in the Elvis movie. So I really liked Elvis, and I would recommend it. Probably be that and RRR would be my strongest recommendations for a movie for 2022. All right, let's head back to the chat before we round off the Oscars chat. Yeah, they did the yellow filter in South Park. I don't watch all the South Park episodes, but I do occasionally catch a few of them. Best movie I've seen about a musician is about Robert Johnson. Oh man, Robert Johnson's brilliant. I listened to all of his music last year. There's not that much of it. Unfortunately, he died very young, but there's about 2 albums worth. It's just terrific stuff. I've seen Buena Vista Social Club. That's a good movie. I've seen that years ago. It's quality. I wonder what Tolkien would have been saying if he saw Rings of Power. Well, let's just be glad that he didn't. And his son also didn't see it, and thank God. At least we know why his son held on to the rights and wouldn't give them to Hollywood, so stuff like that wouldn't happen. Thank God. Good son. Filial man. It's a bit problematic that they depict black elves, dwarves, and hobbits in Rings of Power, which means it's now canon by the Third Age, says Fremen on the Sand. I don't think it qualifies as canon because it's well established that this is fan fiction. In the minds of normies, yes, maybe they think of that as canon now, or they think of Rings of Power as a legitimate Lord of the Rings TV show, and legitimate Lord of the Rings canon, which is a shame because it really did take a big stinking dump all over that franchise. It was horrible what they did. But I don't think it's necessarily, it's not canon, it's crappy fan fiction. They'll be interested to see what they do in season 2. Like, how are they going to fix that? They should have hired me. I did a script treatment for them. I made them a proposal. I made a full video about how to fix Rings of Power, and they spat it back in my face. They wouldn't take me up on the offer. Well, they're going to regret it. All right. Peter Jackson would never have been able to do Lord of the Rings today. He wouldn't. No, he wouldn't. That's exactly right. That's a point that I made in a video I did on Lord of the Rings. Thank God it was made in the late 90s. It started production, I think, in 1996 or something like that, and it wrapped up around 2001, 2002 with reshoots. If that was done today, it would not stand a chance. It would be a terrible movie. They'd race swap, they'd gender swap, they'd have a strong focus on sexuality. They'd have all these bloody themes. They'd probably toss in a refugee theme. Oh, it'd be awful. Just thank God, thank God that those movies were made before Hollywood could do what they would do today. Who knows? Because they're going to make another one. Warner Brothers have said they're going to make another Lord of the Rings movie. They're in talks with Peter Jackson about it. So they may yet do what they can to utterly eviscerate and intersectionalize the Lord of the Rings books, but we'll see what happens. I think they're going to do that to Harry Potter, to be honest. I think they're, because Warner Brothers are remaking Harry Potter, apparently. And I reckon they're just going to go down the easy route. They're just going to remake all the movies from 1 all the way up to the last movie. And you'll see a lot of race and gender swaps, and there'll be a far bigger focus on sexuality this time around. And you'll see all the intersectional stuff that you would expect from them. So that's I would say very likely to happen. But to be honest, I don't care that much. Like the original Harry Potter movies, they're not that good. Some of them are good, some of them are crap, and they're always going to be there. It's not like they can take them away from you. And if they do all this crap with the remake, no one's going to like it anyway. It'll be funny to watch, I suppose, and make fun of, but they can do what they want. I'm not a huge fan of the Harry Potter franchise anyway. Can't wait for Queen Kong. Queen Kong's going to be good. Yeah, Queen Kong. It was King Kong, but then he went through a period of his life where he was, just really trying to find his truth, and he ultimately decided that he wanted to be called Queen Kong, and he dyed his hair pink, and he becomes a brave and stunning advocate for trans rights in Hollywood. Yeah, that's exactly what we need. Like, screw the King Kong massive battles with dinosaurs movies. We need Queen Kong now. Hey, modern audiences need this, right? Times have changed. People have moved on. Modern audiences want to see different things now. They don't like fun anymore. They like just the most boring garbage full of condescending, tokenized, intersectional nonsense. So yeah, Queen Kong, absolutely. Can't wait for that one. Thank you, Reese Donald. All right, let's head back and wrap up our Oscars chat. So All Quiet on the Western Front was nominated. That was an easy nomination. Great music, excellent cinematography. It looks amazing, and pretty good message. Anti-war. I'm always up for an anti-war movie. I'm anti-war myself. I don't like wars. I don't think people should go and get blown up so that powerful elites can maintain their power. I think that was true in World War One, and I think that's true today. And World War One, it's my least favorite war. I despise it. I absolutely hate that war. It gave birth to communism. It birthed communism as a real political force, because at the time, communism had been it had been a rising political force, but the revolution had never happened. Most Marxists at the time thought, well, Marx was wrong and the revolution is never going to take place. But unfortunately, World War One happened, and then it did take place in Russia, and that opened up the great nightmare of the 20th century, which led to the threat of communism in Germany, which led to the Nazis, and we all know what happened after that. And so, yeah, the World War One is in my mind, it's the opening of the great nightmare of the 20th century. And I don't think Britain, or what at the time was Britain and Ireland, should have fought in World War One. I think we should have stayed out of it and just let the French and Germans have at one another. It was none of our business. We shouldn't have been there. And if the Germans did win the war, well, fine, let them win. I mean, they're no worse than the French. And there's no need to go sending millions of young men to their deaths to defend a country with an ultra-aggressive foreign policy that has a massive empire spanning through the world. They're big boys. They can handle it themselves. And if they lose, fuck them, not our problem. That's my attitude to World War One. So it is good to see a movie like All Quiet on the Western Front, which does remind audiences of the utter waste of that war. Millions of good young men just sent to die for nothing, absolutely nothing. Great movie. And yeah, the music as well. Because I rarely hear film music that I like anymore. It's always very generic, but the music in that movie is terrific. Really good score. All right, so we'll round things out with the Banshees of Inisherin. Now, this is my favorite movie of 2022. Banshees of Inisherin is brilliant. You might not like it if you are like an action junkie, or if you have kind of TikTok brain and the internet has just torn your brain to shreds and you can't pay attention to a more slow-paced, more reflective movie for 2 hours, a movie that really requires you to just sit down and watch it and doesn't try to throw all this garbage at the screen. You probably won't like this movie, but if you haven't, if your brain has survived the modern era, you should like it. It's really funny. It's very idiosyncratic Irish humor, which is why I like it. But I do think a lot of people will be able to pick up on it as well. It's beautiful. It's a beautifully shot film. It's beautifully directed. The acting is excellent. I think that Colin Farrell should win the Oscar for Best Actor because he's absolutely brilliant in it. But then so is Brendan Gleeson. He's also excellent. And there's another actor in it, a guy called Kyan, something Kyan. He's really good. He's a young fella. He's brilliant in it. So the acting is excellent. The writing, the dialogue is brilliant. It's very funny. It's very bleak, which is a hallmark of Irish movies. Irish movies are generally very bleak. And this movie is also very bleak. It also has elements of surrealism. And it has a lot of symbolic depth. This might be a movie that I'm going to watch it again, I think, at some point and really look out for the symbolism and try to analyze it in some depth because there's a lot of symbolic meaning to the movie. It also has an anti-war message, but it's much more subtle. It's mostly... I was actually thinking that the whole movie might be an allegory of the Irish Civil War because the Irish Civil War is one of the stupidest, most pointless and needless wars ever to have occurred. Only a few hundred people died, but they didn't need to die. It was a really ridiculous war fought over nothing. I won't get into the history of it, but I think possibly this movie might be an allegory of it because it's about two men who are having this squabble over, honestly, it's ridiculous. But it's a brilliant film. I think it's the best movie of 2022, and it would be my pick for the best movie and my top recommendation. Absolutely brilliant. Just for the acting alone, there are some movies that you can enjoy just for the lead performance or performances, like American Psycho. I've seen that movie a million times. I can still watch it and love it just by watching the portrayal of Patrick Bateman. Christian Bale's performance in that movie is incredible. I just love watching it. Another one is Nightcrawler. Jake Gyllenhaal. Jake Gyllenhaal in Nightcrawler is just amazing to watch. It's awesome, absolutely brilliant. And this is another one of those movies. Just Colin Farrell is superb in it. It's an amazing performance, and it's so enjoyable just to watch that performance. And when you watch this, let's say you watch Elvis and you watch Banshees of Inisherin, you look at Tom Hanks' performance in Elvis, which is terrible. All I see is Tom Hanks with really bad prosthetics. That's what I see when I look at that movie. I see a bad casting decision. I cannot get away from Tom Hanks' face. It's so absurd. It's like, why am I looking at Tom Hanks in a fat suit? I can't get away. It's the biggest problem with the movie. But when I watch Banshees of Inisherin, I don't see Colin Farrell. I see this character that he's portraying. I never see the actor. It's perfect. It's brilliant. And in terms of who should win Best Actor, it would either be him, Colin Farrell for Banshees of Inisherin, or Austin Butler for Elvis. I would give it to Colin Farrell because I think that actors win too many awards for portraying famous people and celebrities. I think that guy Butler did a great job with Elvis, and his career will have a boost, but he doesn't need to be having awards thrown at him. There's been enough of that. And like Jamie Foxx winning a award for his cringy performance in Ray. No thanks, no more of that. Now Austin Butler's a lot better as Elvis than Jamie Foxx was as Ray, but great performance. But I think that it's better to recognize more original interpretations of a character, like what Colin Farrell does in Banshees of Inisherin. It's a really great movie. I would highly recommend it, and if it was up to me, it would win multiple awards. All right, so I'll head back to the chat here, just have a look, see what people are saying. I found out about what Viggo Mortensen did with the dagger that was thrown at his face. He really caught it, no camera tricks. Yeah, I heard that. I think I saw a YouTube video about that, but I didn't watch it. But I did hear that that's what he did. I don't, and Igor says, I don't think we will see a Harry Potter movie soon. If you look at the stuff they're doing to J.K. Rowling these days, I think we did have the Fantastic Beast movies last year, which were crap, and that franchise is dead now. That franchise is gone, just completely gone. The Harry Potter franchise is still very healthy. I mean, you've seen that with the video game there. what's it called? Hogwarts Legacy. I haven't played it. Maybe I'll play it. I haven't had time recently, but that did amazingly well. And if they bring back the Hogwarts, like Hogwarts is one of the reasons Fantastic Beasts failed is because it doesn't have Hogwarts. Hogwarts is the beating heart of that movie franchise, and Hogwarts is a character in its own right. But in those wretched Fantastic Beast movies, they didn't have that, and God, those movies are a mess. Anyway, there's a ton of things wrong with them. Once they go back to Hogwarts, there's rumors that they might do a TV series or a film based on that video game, Hogwarts Legacy, because it was so successful. I think that would be very successful because people love Hogwarts. They really love Hogwarts, and excuse me, I think they would love to see it on screen again. They would love to see the character of Hogwarts come back. And also, it's a school drama. Let's not forget, it's not just about the magic. It's about school kids having their school kid lives, which a lot of people liked. A lot of people really enjoy that school drama aspect of Harry Potter. So, yeah, that is that is my wee chat about the Razzies and the Oscars. I think that the best movie should have gone to RRR or Banshees of Inisherin, and worst movie for me has to be Blonde. Blonde is just an absolutely terrible movie. It's almost impossible to watch. Like if I said to you, go and watch Blonde just to see what the worst viewing experience or one of the worst viewing experiences of 2022 is, you wouldn't be able to finish it. You wouldn't be able to get past the 30-minute mark. It's the director has made a movie that is almost impossible to get through. It's absolutely terrible. So I would give it to Blonde. Like I said, I wouldn't give it to the Pinocchio remake because I don't think it qualifies. It's a plagiarism. And there are other movies nominated that I haven't mentioned. Those movies were I did talk Women Talking, which it was nominated because it's feminist. There's another one called Triangle of Sadness that I didn't talk about. It's a very obscure film that I haven't seen, and I don't think many people have seen it. And Tar was also nominated, but I didn't get around to checking that one out. Maybe it's good. I have absolutely no idea, and it does. To be honest, it's not a movie that particularly interests me. All right, so we'll just finish up in the chat here. And Fremen Ondesand, Fremen, you've been with me for either the entire video or most of the video, so thanks very much for tuning in and keeping up with it. So remember the third Viewmaster toy? I'd argue that that's better than modern VR because you can take real stereoscope photographs of real things and it looks so good. I've only tried VR a few times. VR to me, VR reminds me of 3D TV. It's better than 3D TV. 3D TV was terrible. But what I mean is, it's just not something that consumers want in large enough numbers for it to ever really take off. I mean, VR has been around I first tried it in 2017. And it was pretty fun. It was cool. I had a good time with it, but it's the kind of thing that I would only do a few times a year, if that. If I'm gaming, I don't want to be gaming with a headset on. It's just too much effort. I want to lie down on a couch and play a Switch or something, or I just want to play a PC game. And that's just me personally. I know some people like VR, but I just can't see it ever taking off. I don't think people don't want to make an effort when they're entertaining themselves. When they're at leisure, at home, they don't want to have to make an effort. That's why 3D TVs didn't work. People didn't want to have to sit down, put on the glasses, and watch just like you do in a cinema, because that's not how people interact with movies at home. They are on their phone, they're eating snacks, they're talking to someone, they're doing laundry, the movie's on. And that's generally how they interact with movies at home. And 3D TV kind of tried to force the cinema experience of movies into the home, and it didn't work. And I think VR, it might work well in a VR cafe or a VR theme park type format, but as an at-home entertainment, I just don't think it works that well. It's a fun man toy, and it's a fun toy for a kid to get bored of over the course of a couple of months. But I can't see it ever taking off. Like Zuckerberg's metaverse idea, it's never going to happen. It's just not. People just don't want the technology. Now, we might get AR glasses. I think that's what Apple are going to do. Apple are going to try to bring out AR glasses whereby you will be able to interact with the digital realm through these AR glasses. Now, that would be cool. Like, you're still seeing the real world. It's not taking you out of the real world. You're still seeing it. And you're also able to interact with a digital world which has been superimposed on top of it and which you can access through the goggles. There's a lot of potential there. I think that could maybe really take off. Like, for example, if you could play Pokemon Go. I never played Pokemon Go because I couldn't be bothered holding my phone up and tracking it around. But if I could do that with a pair of glasses, like I put on a pair of AR glasses and then I can see the entire world of Pokemon Go around me, that would be amazing. I would love that. I would definitely play that game. I'm not going to lie. So I could see AR taking off, but VR, I think, will always remain a niche market. Yeah, Reese says it's still a bit pricey. I wouldn't buy one. I don't own a headset. I've just been to VR cafes and tried it out a little bit. Lord Glorious says, great live chat. Thank you very much, Lord Glorious. Yeah, but it's not something I would ever want to buy. VR. As for gaming, a Switch is sufficient, and I don't game that much anymore because I don't have time. But I do it occasionally, and I might get a gaming laptop this year because I want to speed up my editing process for my YouTube videos. So that would be fun because then I'd be able to play modern games on it. All right, so I think that is enough for our chat. I'll just round off things quickly. I think worst movie, just to round up, worst movie has to be Blonde for me. Best movie, Banshees of Inisherin. Best director, that's a tough one. I mean, Baz Luhrmann did a terrific job with Elvis, although the casting of Tom Hanks, no. I suppose that just about takes him, just about edges him out of it. The director of Banshees of Inisherin, there you go. That was terrific. And I would also give it to that movie for writing. I could see director going to, like, it should be RRR, really, because it's such an amazing achievement, that movie. Best director. Editing should be Everything Everywhere All at Once. And I could also see that's going to get best actress for Michelle Yeoh and best supporting actress for, what's her name? Jessica Sue, I think, the girl that plays Jabu, or it's hard name to remember. Anyway, the villain in the movie. Jabu Tobaki, I think, is the Jabu Tobaki, something like that. That's the name of the villain. She's brilliant. I think she deserves the supporting actress. Worst supporting actor should go to Tom Hanks for Elvis because he was not only terrible, but he ruined the movie. Worst actor, that's a tough one. Maybe give it to Machine Gun Kelly for Good Morning. And yeah, can't think of much else off the top of my head. But worst director should really be Robert Zemeckis for Pinocchio. That movie is just sad and tragic and pathetic and awful and terrible and everything that is wrong with Disney. So yeah, that's a few of my thoughts on the Razzies and the Oscars. So I hope you enjoyed the chat. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great weekend. All right, cheers from the Despot.